Hello and welcome to part 2 of this video series on using SQL Server 2005 Analysis Services with the Project Server 2007 Cube Building service. In this second installment, we'll look at the configuration steps necessary for the Project Server 2007 computer and client computers to get the Cube Building service working properly. This includes installing the necessary components on the computer running the Project Server application service. These include the SQL Server native client, the SQL Server 2005 Management Objects Collection, and the SQL Server 2005 backward compatibility components. We're also going to configure some account settings. This includes granting DB data reader permissions for the Analysis Services account on the reporting database, adding our shared services provider account to the Olap users group and as a server role member in Analysis Services, and adding the required components on our client computer, including the Microsoft Office web components and the SQL Server 2005 Analysis Services 9.0 OLADB provider. The first thing we need to do is to install some prerequisites, so let's head over to the computer running Project Server. Now I'm again going to log in using my Farm Administrator account. Now there are three components that I need to install here. One is the Microsoft SQL Server native client. The second is Microsoft SQL Server 2005 Management Objects Collection. And the third is Microsoft SQL Server 2005 Backward Compatibility Components. Now, all three of these items need to be installed on each computer that is running the Project Server application service in the farm. Now in this case, that's just this computer, but if you have other computers that are also running the Project Server application service, you'll want to repeat the same procedure on each of them. Now again, I'm going to go back to my TechNet article, because I know on this page there is a link to the download center where I can obtain these components. You can see that they're listed right here, and they're all part of the feature pack for SQL Server 2005. So I'm just going to click here. And the first item I'm looking for is SQL Server Native Client. So I'm going to scroll down and look for that. And it's right here. Now I want the x86 package because I'm running on an x86 version. If you're running 64-bit, you'd want the x64 package. And I'm just going to right-click and save this to my desktop. Now the next item I'm looking for is the SQL Server 2005 Management Objects Collection. So I'll scroll down a little bit more. And again, I want the x86 package. And then finally, I want the SQL Server 2005 Backward Compatibility Components. And I notice we passed that on the way down here, so I'm going to swing back up here. And again, here they are, and I want the x86 package. And that's all I need from this download page, so I'll go ahead and minimize the browser here. And I need to install each of these three items. So I'll double click, click Run, and then go through the wizard here, accept the license agreement, type in my name and company, and we don't need the SDK, we just need the client components, which is the default. Click Next, and then click Install. And with that done, I'll click Finish, and we'll go to the next one. And this is the SQL Server Management Objects Collection. I'll click Next, accept the agreement, add my info, and click Install. And click Finish. And we've got one more to go. This, of course, is the backward compatibility components. Accept the agreement, Add my login name and company, click Next. Now for the backward compatibility components, we only need the decision support objects. So I actually don't need to install these first 4 items, so I'm actually going to go ahead and take these out of the install. You don't have to do this, but in this case all I care about is the DSO objects, so that's all I'm going to install. Click Next, click Install, and click Finish. Now the next thing we need to do is to set up some account settings on the computer running analysis services, and for that we're going to need to know what account our shared services provider is running under. So to find that out, I'm going to go to Start, Administrative Tools, and then we'll go down to SharePoint 3.0 Central Administration. And this will launch the SharePoint Central Administration website. Now I want to go over to Shared Services Administration, and I want to go up to Proj SSP, which is the shared services provider that we're using to run Project Server. Click the drop down here and go down to Edit Properties. And all I want to do in here is look under SSP Service Credentials, and you can see in this case this is my Farm Administrator account. But you'll want to take note of whichever account you're using here because we'll need to do some setup with that in the next step. So this is my farm account, and I can go up and click Cancel. And now let's switch over to the computer running analysis services. Now the first thing we want to do here is to add our shared services provider account to the Olap users group. So I'm going to go back down here to Computer Management, and this is the Olap Users Group account that we used to set up the repository before. So I'm going to double-click this, click Add, and I'm going to type in my farm account, click OK. And that makes my shared services provider account a member of the Olap users group, so I'll click OK again. Next, I want to add the shared services provider account as a server role member in Analysis Services. So I'm going to go back down here to Management Studio, where we're connected to Analysis Services. And then I'm going to go back up to my top node here, right-click, click Properties. And then I want to go up to Security. And here again, I want to add my shared services provider account. And I'll click OK. Now the third thing we need to do is to make sure that the account that is running the Analysis Services service has at least DB data reader permissions for the Project Server 2007 reporting database. So I'm going to go to Start, Administrative Tools, and then I'm going to go down and look at my services. And I'll scroll down here until we start seeing SQL Server Services. And here's my Analysis Services service. So I'm going to right-click and go to Properties. And then we'll take a look at what account is being used to log on for this service. And this is Litware SQL SVC. So I'm going to click Cancel. I'm going to go back down to SQL Server Management Studio. And then I'm going to go up here and expand logons. And we can see here is Litware SQL SVC. And I'm just going to right-click and click Properties. And let's take a look at the user mappings for this account. And here's our Project Server 2007 reporting database. And I can see right now the only membership that it has is public. So I'm going to go ahead and select this, and then I'm going to go back down to the membership list and click DB Data Reader, and then I'll click OK. Now that's actually all of the setup that we need to do. The next thing to do is to actually build an Olap cube. So let's switch back over to the computer running project server. So to build the cube, we need to go to our project web access site. And under server settings, let's look at the build settings under cube. Now we want to check and make sure our analysis services server is correct, and it is. It's litware-SQL, and we've given our database a name. Now there are two more parameters that we can set here. One of them is the database date range, which will specify the date range of data that will be included in the cube, and the other is the cube update frequency if we want to have the cube updated automatically on a regular basis. I'm going to leave these be for the moment and just click Save and Build Now. Now the cube building process will actually take some time depending on how big your databases are. I've speeded it up in the video so that we don't have to wait that long. The process can take a fair amount of system resources on your analysis services server, so you may want to schedule cube building to take place during off hours. And we can see here cube build request completed successfully. So let's jump over to our computer running analysis services and take a look and make sure there really is a cube there. So here on the analysis services server, I'll just go down here and click on the Management Studio instance that's connected to analysis services. And if we go up to databases and right click and click refresh, we can see that there is our litware cube and it's ready to use. Now with the cube there are a couple more steps that we need to take, and these need to be done on any client computer that you'll be using to view cube data. So let's switch over to litware client. Now I'm going to log in here as John Woods. And John Woods is a member of the executives group on Project Server. I'm going to start Internet Explorer and open my PWA site. And I'll maximize this. Now the first thing we need to do is to actually check an Internet Explorer setting. We want to make sure that we can access data sources across domains. So I'm going to go over to Tools, Internet Options, and Security. And we can see here that the browser is running in the local intranet. So I'm going to make sure this is set to local intranet. Go down to Custom Level. And then I'm going to scroll down here to the Miscellaneous section. And I want to look for access data sources across domains, and I'll click Enable and click OK. And click OK again. Now to be able to view the data in the Olap cube, there are two things that I need to install on the client. One is the Microsoft Office Web Components, and the other is the SQL Server 2005 Analysis Services 9.0 OLADB Provider. Now if I go over to Reporting and click, there is a link right here that I can click on to install the Office Web Components. So I'm going to click on that, and then click Run. And I'll accept the license agreement. Click Install. And with that installed, I'll click OK, and then go up and refresh this window. Now here it says the query could not be processed because it does not have access to the database. The problem that we're actually running into here is that we have not yet installed the Analysis Services OLADB Provider component. So I'm going to minimize this, and again I'm going to take a look at the Analysis Services Cube Building topic on TechNet because I know that there is a link to the SQL Downloads page here, and I'll scroll down here. And here it is, and again I'll just save it to the desktop. Minimize my window, and we'll install it. Accept the licensing agreement, click Next. Type in my name and company, and install. Now with that installed, let's go see if we can see some data now. And I'll refresh this page. And there we go. We've got a whole bunch of data from our Olap cubes here. So to recap what we saw here in part 2, first we installed the prerequisites required on the computer running the Project Server Application Service, including the SQL Server Native Client, the SQL Server 2005 Management Objects Collection, and the SQL Server 2005 Backward Compatibility components. Then we did some account configuration. We granted DB Data Reader permissions for the Analysis Services account on the Project Server 2007 Reporting Database. We added our Shared Services Provider account to the Olap Users Group, and we also made that same account a server role member in Analysis Services. And then on the client computer, we installed the Microsoft Office Web Components and the SQL Server 2005 Analysis Services 9.0 OLADB provider. And of course, we built the cube itself and took a look at some data from the client computer. That concludes part 2 of this video series on using SQL Server 2005 Analysis Services with the Project Server 2007 Cube Building Service.